an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Vorkosigan Saga Book 3-ish. According to this, it's Miles Vorkosigan Book 2, Chapters 7, 8, and 9. In these chapters, we have a ship, we're on our way, everything's looking okay, and then our friends get boarded. And although later it seems like maybe it wasn't going to be quite as nefarious as it sounded, I can't help but feel like this dude made it sound pretty nefarious, and maybe he only has himself to blame for the way everybody took what he said. I'm just saying. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Jen for commissioning this episode. What's up, Jen? Jen's done the last few episodes now, so thank you so much, Jen, for what I have to assume had been like a bulk booking at the time. It always helps me out because God knows we're just about paycheck to paycheck. So every time I get a bunch of bookings at once, I'm like, oh, thank God, groceries. And yeah, these chapters, I just keep being so startled. And I know that this is real, but you guys, as somebody who lives with crippling, at sometimes, anxiety, seeing somebody who just is willing to like fly by the seat of their pants the way that Miles is, it catches me up short. It really does. Like the amount of the sheer number of moments when he has to make a call and he chooses like the ballsiest thing. I can't help but be constantly like, I don't know. Is he just insane? Am I that much of a wimp? Like, what's true here? And, you know, maybe it's a little bit of column A, column B. I don't know. But I really enjoy that she has decided to make him a character who is willing to take these risks, because it makes a lot of sense as somebody who has like probably felt very stifled by having this disability and being surrounded by people who value like guts and physical strength so much. Acting out, and I say acting out, but like I don't mean it in the negative way that it's often taken. I just mean like choosing this method to express that sort of like ballsiness makes a ton of character sense. And yet it's still hard for me, even though it's fiction. It's not real. And even though I know that like likely things are going to be okay, I cannot help but constantly go, oh, dude, wait. Oh, I don't know about that. Are you sure you want to do that, buddy? Over and over again. Like he's my child. Like I'm just sitting on the sidelines, biting my nails, going, I don't know. And in a lot of ways, that's great, actually. That's just good storytelling, because I do want to keep listening to the audiobook and see what happens. You know, I find myself going so close to over listening, you guys. There have been a couple times where I've gotten like a couple minutes into the next chapter and had to stop and be like, fuck, because I am just really, really engaged. And I really like Miles as a character. And I think that the things that I feel he's getting wrong about the personalities of some of the people around him or the way that folks are responding to him, despite that I think he's getting them wrong, I totally understand how he is coming to the conclusions that he does. And that's really the thing for me, because I can understand if you set up a character to think a certain way or already be sensitive to certain things and have the predisposition to believe the worst of what people mean regarding certain topics. I can believe that they would misinterpret comments and take things personally that they shouldn't, etc., etc. And a lot of times authors just don't really go to the trouble of setting that up well. And they have the character be like very logical mostly, but then they misinterpret things in a way that I'm like, you've been pretty smart up to now. What happened? And it's just clearly contrived for the plot to do what the author wants the plot to do. And, you know, that's like, sometimes I'm sure you write yourself into a situation where that has to happen. But I think there are a lot of writers who tend to fall onto that a lot. And you can see constantly how that's happening. So I appreciate that who he is has been so well fleshed out for us and mapped out that even when I'm like, oh, dude, no, that is not what they're thinking. The fact that he thinks the way he does is completely in line with what I know about him. So yeah, I just, you know, it's good writing. What am I going to say, guys? Oh my God, this writer knows how to write a story. But like, it may sound like that's kind of, you know, bar on the floor, but you'd just be really surprised, I think, at how often people can't seem to clear that bar. That's all I'm saying. All right, so chapter 7. Miles is going to meet the guy who is looking for somebody to move his cargo for him. This guy is very jumpy. It's clear he is dealing in some shit that is no good. Like, or not even that the stuff is no good, but that he has to, like, meet with people that are dangerous and, if not necessarily untrustworthy, although I think I can safely say probably untrustworthy, at the very least are liable to resort to violence. I can understand having, for example, a metal detector around the door so that when people come in, you can check and make sure that they're not carrying anything. And this dude, like, it's interesting because I was sort of thinking that he was going to end up being a little bit more used to the way things work, but there's a real sense to me of this guy being an amateur. It's just like things like the way that he clearly broadcasts what pocket his gun is in to Bothari, and so it makes it very clear, like, oh, there's only that one weapon. I know exactly where it is. If you try and pull it, I will be ready for all of it. All of this says to me that this is not a guy who has done this sort of thing many times before. And Miles is coming in here, and the way that he plays this is just so golden, because Miles is letting this man think that he is part of a mercenary fleet. It's not even like he doesn't go into it intending for this man to think this, and he doesn't set this up ahead of time. But once they're in the midst of the conversation and he sees the assumptions that this man is jumping to, and the way that man is reacting to those assumptions as well. Like, if somebody makes an assumption about you, but they seem to be like, well, now I think a lot less of you, you're going to be much more apt to correct them than if they jump to a conclusion about you and seem impressed. So Miles is taking very close notes on how this man is reacting to everything. And it is clearly like, again, I can't help but feel like this is evidence of this man being an amateur. It clearly feels to me like this dude just thinks like, okay, well, if you work with mercenaries, then you must be a badass and you'll be able to handle this. When, I mean, maybe, I don't know. It just gives them street cred. And the fact that it seems like this guy just needs to hear that you've got street cred to feel more comfortable with the whole setup, that is sounding very, very amateur. I just keep coming back to that word, but really that is what it is. So he's coming in fucking Mayhew, who is very hungover. Miles isn't yet. Eventually, that shit begins to hit him. And Mayhew actually winds up calling out the type of alcohol it is. And I think he says that it's like creme de menthe. I think it's like creme de menthe or peppermint schnapps or something like that. But I don't think it's schnapps, because that's like a brand, if I'm not mistaken. And creme de menthe is just a type of liquor. So evidently he's been drinking this like kind of cordial, which is so foul. First of all, I am somebody who doesn't react well to alcohol anyway, but when it's alcohol mixed with a lot of sugar, I will feel sick quite quickly. And I cannot imagine just drinking that, which is supposed to be sort of an accent within a cocktail, drinking that by itself. That is so disgusting. Oh my God. And Miles felt awake and pepped up on it, which that is not usually how bodies react to alcohol. So, oh my God. You guys. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. Anybody listening is like, why is she freaking out? Ms. T just said creme de meth. M-E-T-H. This is what I get for only listening to the audiobook. It didn't sound like that. I heard menthe, and I assumed it's creme de meth. Oh my God. What? Oh, that's so gross. Oh my God. Oh, that's so much worse. No wonder he was fucking awake. Oh. I mean, there's a point later where, like, I think Mayhew is talking to Elena about how he's been so hopped up and now Miles is finally going to calm down. And he is led to believe that this is how Miles always is. But we know from being inside Miles's head that he isn't like... He did feel different. That was a whole different thing. So, oh my God. So he just started this whole adventure while hopped up on fucking meth. Of course. Jesus Christ. Miles, please do not get hooked on fucking meth. Please don't. Nobody. Oh boy. Oh boy. Whoa. That's taking a turn. You guys, I was not expecting that. Y'all really changed the whole landscape of this for me. But anyway, so Mayhew is fucked up, and he doesn't like address Miles with the kind of deference that he should. And Miles is calling him out because he says, "You'll find out, kid." And Miles says, "You're going to have to stop calling me kid. You're my armsman. You're supposed to address me as my lord." And he, of course, is just like, "Oh, come on." And Miles says, "It's like a salute. This is like, you're saluting the uniform, not the man. Being Vor is like wearing an invisible uniform you can never take off." And I love this. "Look at Bothari. He's called me my lord ever since I was born. If he can, you can. You're his brother in arms." Mayhew looked up at the sergeant. Bothari looked back, his face saturnine in the extreme. Miles had the impression that had Bothari been a more expressive man, he would have made rude noises at the concept of Mayhew as his brother-in-arms. Mayhew evidently received the same impression, for he straightened up a little more and bit out, "Yes, my lord." I do really enjoy that. Bothari, being a man of few words, oftentimes is just like room for us to project onto him. But then there being moments like this where he is making himself quite clear, only with his expression. I very much enjoy it. So this dude calls himself Carl Dahm. I'm not sure if that's his real name. I don't know that it really matters. But Miles is talking to him about his like capacity and, whether or not they're going to be able to. He says, I'm not familiar with jump ships. Is it fast? Is it maneuverable? And finally, Miles says, you're asking whether we can outrun or evade a blockade, and no. And he's like, well, then we're wasting each other's time. And he says after that, so much time lost, and begins to stand. And I was like, I really want to know what this is about. What time lost? How? Why? What is it that this money is for? Like, just desperately want a bit of info, because like I said, this guy doesn't feel like he really knows what he's doing. And that, for me, it can be either that he's involved in something that's just getting off the ground, that is actually like kind of a moral cause, and this is a really good thing if you were to hear about what it was he was like about to fight for. Or he could be involved in something incredibly shady and awful. And Miles not wanting to ask questions about it, I feel, is like real evidence of how young he is. Because all he is worried about right now is how much money he can make on this in order to pay back the note on the ship faster. Because he really like miscalculated how much he was going to need to do work-wise in order to make it up. But as much as I understand that motivation, Miles, if this guy is doing something that's going to wind up harming a lot of people, are you going to be able to live with that? That's the big question. And it's not a question Miles ever asks himself. And like I said, I am not very surprised, because when you are that young, taking things one step further mentally is just not quite second nature. You're used to just doing whatever's in front of you, and then you'll find out about the consequences later on, maybe. And I don't know if Miles has like just decided that he doesn't want to know, because whatever it is, if it isn't good, he doesn't want to feel that kind of burden. Or if it's simply that he hasn't thought of it, but I kind of err on he hasn't thought of it, you know? So he is, this part, load up you and your weapons, take you halfway, make you get out and walk. I appreciate your need for caution. What weapons? Said Dom, attempting belatedly to regain his cover. What weapons? Echoed Mayhew in a frantic, near-silent whisper to Miles' ear. Your plowshares and pruning hooks, then, said Miles tolerantly. But I suggest we end the game and get to work. I am a professional, and so, obviously, are you, or you wouldn't have gotten this far. And I love when he says, I am a professional. There's a, thought to the side, and if you buy that, I have this nice farmland on Barriar for sale. And it makes total sense that this guy is buying this if he himself is also a total amateur. Somebody who knows what they're doing, I don't think necessarily would have posted where they did looking for help, would have bought the story that Miles is telling here. Like, there's a lot about how all of this goes down and what this man is willing to take on faith that wouldn't work if they were dealing with somebody with more experience. So, yeah, this is I just am really concerned about what we're doing, because there is even a possibility that some of this stuff is going to be like used on Barriar to hurt people that Miles knows personally, which it's already terrible if he doesn't know them. But if he does, that is so much worse in a way that, I'm sorry, it may sound cruel, but is sort of inescapably true. Like, it's just human nature. The people that we know, we're going to feel more strongly about what happens to them. So, this is when this guy starts to question him about how many troops are in your outfit? What ships do you have? Oh, hell, now what? Miles extemporized like mad. Major Dom, I didn't mean to mislead you. I detached from my outfit at the moment. They're tied up on another contract. I was just visiting Beta Colony for medical reasons, so I have only myself and my immediate staff and a ship my fleet could spare here to offer you. But we're expected to operate independently in my bunch, so since it will be a little time yet before I can rejoin them, and I find your problem tactically interesting, my services are yours. And when he says, what rank should I address you? He says, just go with Mr. Naismith for now. And he calls them the Dendari Mercenaries. I don't know if that name is meant to have significance. It didn't really ring a bell for me, but like a faint one, but not enough of one for me to be sure. So curious about that if anybody has something to tell me on it. So as they're leaving, Bothari says, bruh, I thought what we were doing was hiring Mayhew to pull this off. And now you're like going with him? I didn't know. This is not how this should go. And when Miles is like, I mean, do you think that I should let Mayhew handle this all on his own? Bothari can't help but be like, well, no, this man does not look capable of placing a lunch order, so I guess not. And Miles says, besides, it'll put a little excitement in your life, Sergeant. It has to be dull as dirt following me around all day. I'd be bored to tears. I like being bored, said Bothari morosely. Oh, my God. Oh, Jen says, mountains Gregor was hidden in during the Pretender ship, the Dendari Mountains. Right, okay, gotcha. So they get home, well, to his grandmother's, and they find Elena in a real state. And she's talking about, like, the terrible things people were doing, and she can't even describe them. And understandably, he thinks she's talking about pornography. So he's just like, well, what did you see? And then it turns out that it was a movie, The Thin Blue Line, which I have my own feelings about things called that these days, just by coincidence. It had been released 2 years ago and had contributed its might to making his school visit to Beta Colony the sometimes surreal experience it had been. Miles's father, then Commodore Vorkosigan, had begun the aborted Barryaran invasion of Beta Colony's ally Escobar 19 years ago as a staff officer. He had ended upon the catastrophic deaths of the co-commanders Admiral Varachier and Crown Prince Serg Vorbara as commander of the Armada. His brilliant retreat was still cited as exemplary in the military annals of Barrayar. The Batons, naturally, took a different view of the affair. The blue in the title of the docudrama referred to the color of the uniform worn by the Baton Expeditionary Force, of which Captain Cordelia Naismith had been a part. And I love when she's like, well, there's no truth to it, is there? And he's like, well, my mom says they didn't wear those uniforms. I'm like, that's not really what she's asking. And I think you know that. My mom swears that she didn't murder Admiral Varachier, and all of this is like right in front of Bothari, and I'm starting to freak out. You guys, this is so interesting. Like, I kept thinking about how many stories are out there that are sort of YA, where our main protagonist begins to learn more about their parents and what their parents have done or were like. And there are a lot out there because that's sort of a rite of passage for a lot of us, is just the moments where we realize that our parents, who we may have looked up to in a number of ways, have done shitty things, or that we were told straight up lies. But it is so much more interesting to come at it when we already know what they did, and seeing how he isn't aware. Like, I have gotten to know Cordelia and Errol and to personally like them. And so a part of me doesn't want him to find out, because I'm like, well, but that's not what we're doing here, though, you know? And I think that if I were just reading this without having read the previous books, and it was just him trying to piece it together, I would be so much less invested. It would be the sort of thing that I would be supposed to care about, but it wouldn't actually really connect with me, because, like, I always take for granted in any YA that somebody's parents were probably shitty, that, like, they probably did some questionable things, and because that's all going to lead to our main character getting into some kind of shenanigans. So their parents had to either be shady or be like victims in a really particular way. And so it would just be kind of a foregone conclusion for me, and I would be impatient with the kid having to get with the program finally and grow up. But in this scenario where you already are aware of what happened, and what happened was truly so awful and so fucked up that it makes complete sense why his parents would not have told him about it. Like, that's one of the things that I always find so tedious in a lot of regular YA, is when the kid eventually finds out the truth, it feels like they shouldn't have lied because the truth isn't even as bad as it's being made out to be. I will often just be kind of like, yeah, I really would have advised telling the kid that a lot, like, earlier, before they really fully understood the implications of it even, maybe. And that way they would grow up knowing it and be able to process it as they grew more experienced with the world and were able to, like, fully comprehend the implications of it. But here it's just so clear why he doesn't know, why he shouldn't probably know, and the way that Bothari shuts this down is so understandable. So yeah, Elena says, "You serve with my Lord Count at Escobar, sir. Tell her it isn't so." "I don't remember Escobar," replied the sergeant stonily, in a tone unusually flat and unencouraging even for him. "No point to that. I was wrong with you. It was wrong for you to see that." The tension in Bothari's shoulders disturbed Miles, and the set look about his eyes. Anger? Over an ephemeral holovid that he had seen before and ignored as readily as Miles had? Elena paused, diverted and confused. "Don't remember, but..." Something clicked in Miles' memory. The medical discharge at last accounted for? "I didn't realize... Were you wounded at Escobar, Sergeant?" "Yes." "Head wound?" Bothari's gaze shifted back to Miles, quelling. Miles permitted himself to be quelled, hugging this new prize of information to himself. A head wound would account for much that had long bemused him in the Liegeman. You guys, I have told this story on other podcasts, so I apologize if you have heard this before and you're just like, wow, this isn't that great a story, Natasha. Can you please shut up? But I'm going to tell it again. So, for those who don't know, my father grew up in Colombia and did not move here until he was about 30. And he was involved in the guerrillas in Colombia, a lot of violence, warfare. When he moved here, he was dealing coke, and he was a go-between, and he was just really, like, involved in such dangerous, violent stuff that I didn't understand fully as a kid. And I knew I had an inkling. We had a lot of weapons in our basement in a spot that, like, was locked off that I wasn't allowed to go to. And there was just he would every week take me to this restaurant and set me off to the side to read while he met with a bunch of dudes in suits who talked very seriously amongst themselves. And then they would just leave. And it was always just sort of a sense of danger to him. But it wasn't until I was in my final year of high school, and my mother had moved out. They were divorcing, and my father was he's somebody who loves to be social, and he was lonely in the house. And my mother, when she was there, she was super antisocial and did not like me having friends over. But my dad loved it. So I started inviting people over all the time, and he was super happy about it. And he started to like hang out with me and my friends, and we would make guacamole and watch movies. And eventually one day he was like, let me take you and your friends out to go eat somewhere. And they really liked him because he was fun sometimes. And we were just eating at this restaurant in a booth. And I don't remember what we were even talking about, but we were asking him questions about his life. And then at one point I said, have you ever killed anyone? And I just get chills even thinking about it. He looked at me, and you could see his eyes shutting down. And he said, you ask too many questions. In like that exact tone. Everything had been jovial, joking around. And then I asked that. And I don't know what I was thinking. I think I just assumed that he hadn't, even though I think I really in my heart knew he probably had. I just didn't consider the gravity of the question I was asking and what that would do to the vibe. And so that moment of him just saying it like it was a yes. I mean, it was clearly a yes. But the way he just, in this situation, it's described as quelling. Yeah. Yup. There's a real similarity between my dad and Bothari in a lot of ways that feels like really upsetting, because my father was sexually abused when he was younger and has been through a lot of like horrific things that he has had to both do and witness being done. And so the trauma and the way that he was just kind of cut off from his emotions and went about things in this very sort of stoic, expressionless way. I just really, really relate to Elena feeling like my dad's a brick wall. Like, I at least had my mother, who was very open and emotional, sometimes too much so. So I had somebody that I could connect with that was an adult. But if I only had my father, oh God, that would have been really hard. So yeah, anyway, this just felt like that to me. It felt really similar, except they are not getting the full story. It just being like a head wound. I mean, a little bit, that's not entirely wrong. It's just so not the story. So to kind of jump ahead here, at first, he's thinking that Elena is not going to come with them. And of course, Bothari does not want Elena to come with them. But then, when his grandmother chimes in that, oh yeah, sure, why don't you leave Elena with me? There's a bunch of sex parties that I can bring her to, and have her hanging out with her pierced ears amongst folks that your father definitely won't approve of. He's like, oh, she's coming with us. And I was like, oh, Grandma, it's just so great. She just has this like little wink that she trades with him, a puckish nod, it's described as, and I loved it so much. So the next 2 days were a blur of motion. To prepare an 8-week run for the old ship within that time limit would have been mind-boggling for an ordinary cargo, but crammed atop that were extras needed for the camouflage scheme. These included a partial cargo of hastily purchased items to provide them with a real manifest in which to embed the false, and supplies needed for rearranging the cargo hold bulkheads flung aboard to wait the actual work to be done en route. Most vital and correspondingly expensive were the extremely advanced Baton mass detector jammers to be run off the ship's artificial gravity, and with which Miles hoped they would foil the Osseran mercenaries' cargo check. It had taken all the simulated political weight Miles could muster on the basis of his father's name to convince the Baton Company representative that he was qualified as a purchaser of the new and still partially classified equipment. And I love that he's just like got this instruction booklet and he's looking at it and he's just like, I don't know what this is. He began to have qualms over Baz Jessek's qualifications as an engineer. And at first, like, it's just that. And then this man is much, like, later than he should be. And Miles is starting to be like, is he even coming? But finally, he does. And we also find out that he has to use up all of his allowance to even pay for their usage fees. And he has to, like, sell the tickets, the Barryard, like, transport tickets. He's basically having to, like, totally liquidate. And I like this aspect of it a lot, that this kid has got guts and gumption. He can come up with a story on the fly, but he is not used to dealing with money. Like, I can understand how, being from the background that he is, that this wouldn't be something that he is super familiar with. I bet that budgeting and stuff like that is a very theoretical exercise, and that he has never really been in a position where he has had to think about it. So it makes a lot of sense to me that he's just sort of taken aback at the actual cost of everything. So they load up all of the supplies, and then there's Waldo handling fee, and I was just like, again. Miles swallowed. Sergeant, I know my father made you a travel allowance. I could repay you in 8 weeks, 2 for 1, for your left pocket. My word on it. Bothari frowned. It's not necessary for you to redeem your word to me, my lord. That was prepaid, long ago. Thanks. Can we keep this between you and me? I mean, no need to mention it to my father. Not if you pay me back. And so it was done. What a joy, Miles thought, to be a military ship captain. Just bill it all to the Emperor. They must feel like a courtesan with a charge card, not like us poor working girls. I really liked that line a lot. It manages to, like, you know, use sex workers in a joke without making the sex work the joke, which is just very, like, uncommon. And eventually, when they get through, fucking the engineer is having to go around and look at everything multiple times and is just starting to be like, am I ever going to be able to get all of this fucking functional? And he does. It just takes a while. So there comes a point when they get a transmission. And, oh, I'm sorry, there's some chat here. Oh, it's Ms. T saying, I don't remember the story I told that I was like, I've told this before. I've listened to 1,000,000 hours and heard this before, but I'm so glad you told me the whole story one more time. Thank you. Okay, good. So it's Lieutenant Croy who is like, I'm sure that this is just something that you were unaware of, but the man that you hired is a deserter, and we are going to have to take him into custody. And Miles is like, what? And he's like, yes, indeed. And Miles is like, no, what? I really can't hear you. Transmission going through a tunnel. And then he just hangs up on him. Oh my God, you guys, he just yanks, he just yanks a bunch of wires out so that it just goes down. I fucking died. This is so janky. Miles. Oh, God. So yeah, this is when Miles starts to feel dizzy and nauseous, and he just like sits on the floor and is kind of going, what the fuck is happening? And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, it's that fucking stuff I was drinking. And I love that Mayhew looks over at him and is like, ha! There it is. He has just really clearly been feeling a bit of a way that this kid was able to indulge the way he did and then walk away feeling nothing the next day, which I can relate to as somebody who is also old enough for shit to like really come back to bite me in a way it sure didn't used to. So I sympathize, Mayhew. And there is some sort of like malicious glee in finally seeing, yeah, now you see what I was talking about. So chapter 8, I think we've done it. According to this, there's nothing behind that wall but the next wall. Miles grinned at Dom. I gave you my word I'd get it together in time, did I not? Dom grinned back, relieved. You're lucky you don't own a faster ship. And that hadn't occurred to me, but I was like, oh yeah, that's true, huh? So eventually there's this moment where they're getting a warning buoy. It's supposed to prevent accidents and misunderstandings in case anybody doesn't know what's going on at the other side, but this time there's a twist. Listen to this. Attention, attention. To all commercial, military, or diplomatic shipping planning to enter Tau Verde local space, warning. You are entering a restricted military area. All entering traffic, without exception, is subject to search and seizure for contraband. Any non-cooperation will be construed as hostile, and the vessel subjected to confiscation or destruction without further warning. Proceed at your own risk. Upon emergence into Tau Verde local space, all vessels will be approached and boarded for inspection. All wormhole jump pilot officers will be detained at this time until their vessel completes its contract with Tau Verde 4 and returns to the jump point. Pilot officers will be permitted to rejoin their vessels upon completion of the outbound inspection. And Dom, who apparently has heard some of this kind of thing before, the hostages is new. And Miles is like, yeah, that's pretty smart, actually. And this is when Dom says they weren't doing it 5 months ago. This means the fighting must still be going on at least. But what? But what is it? But what's the fighting? So it ends with, by order of Admiral Yuan Osir, commanding Osiran Free Mercenary Fleet, under contract to the legal government of Peleus Tau Verde 4. And Dom is like legal government, and he calls them self-aggrandizing criminals. And again, just wanting to know a little bit more about that. Miles goes to speak to Mayhew and is like, do you want to back out? And Mayhew's like, can I? And there's a really great talk here. I loved it so much because Miles is like, I'm going to swear to you that if you volunteer yourself, I'm not going to just bail on you. I won't leave you there. And I just, I'm sworn to you as your liege lord, which you already know, but I am aware that you don't take that as seriously. Mayhew is like, well, if I don't, then what happens? And he says, well, we just have to tell Dom, like, we wasted his time and we took his money and go home. And he talks about this and the consequences of it in a way that did not feel to me like he was trying to manipulate Mayhew. He was just trying to like think through, yeah, if he doesn't, then what? What do we do? And Mayhew says, what if they'd wanted Bothari instead of me? What would you have done then? Oh, I'd go in, said Miles, and then paused. That's different. The sergeant is my liegeman, and I'm not. I'm your liege lord. What you are is a question only you can answer. That is crafty. I could not help but admire that. Once again, I am not trying to insinuate that Miles is playing Mayhew here, although I wouldn't feel like it was a stretch if it turned out he was. I just really think that Miles is giving him an honest answer of like, I'm in for Bothari because I know he's in for me. And I don't know that about you. He would absolutely cover my ass if he had to. And I have no doubt of that. So it would be like without question that I would do the same for him because it's just a matter of honor. But you don't have that kind of feeling of obligation. And so, of course, I'm going to feel differently about doing the same thing for you. And I just really thought that was handled quite well. Mayhew stared into his lap and rubbed his forehead tiredly, one finger unconsciously caressing a silver circle of his implant contact. He looked up at Miles then, an odd hunger in his eyes that reminded Miles for a disquieting instant of the homesick Baz Jessic. I don't know what I am anymore, said Mayhew finally, but I'll make the jump for you and the rest of the horsing around. So he has decided, like, what the hell, basically, you know? There's a real sense of, like, I don't have other options. So to a degree, it's sort of like it's not like ideal, but also maybe that will lead to him being a bit more, like, taking this more seriously as he starts to see the situation that he is in as less of a lark and more of a, this is your life now, bro. You better start acting like it is, you know? So they do the jump and, it's such a weird thing because it says a queasy, wavering dizziness, a few seconds static in the mind, and the wormhole jump to Tau Verde was done. Miles hovered impatiently in nav and comm, waiting for Mayhew, whose few seconds had been biochemically stretched to subjective hours, to crawl out from under his headset. He wondered again just what it was pilots experienced threading a jump that their passengers did not. And where did they go, the one ship in 10,000 that jumped and was never seen again? Take a wormhole jump to hell was an old curse one almost never heard in a pilot's mouth. Mayhew swung up his headset, stretched, and let out a breath. His face seemed gray and lined, drained from the concentration of the jump. That was a shit kicker, he muttered, then straightened, grinned, and met Miles' eye. That'll never be a popular run, let me tell you, kid. Interesting, though. Miles did not correct the honorific. Letting Mayhew rest, he slid into the comm console himself and punched up a view of the outside world. Well, where are they? Don't tell me we got the party ready and the guest of honor's not coming. Are we in the right place? Kid, at the end of a wormhole jump, you're either in the right place or you're a bucket of quarks smeared between Antares and Oz. But he checked anyway. Seems to be. It was a full 4 hours before a blockade ship finally approached them. Its slow approach seemed freighted with deliberate menace until voice contact was made. The mercenary communications officer's tone of sleepy boredom then put it in its true light. They were sauntering. Desultorily, a boarding shuttle was launched. I love this. These guys are not aggro. I mean, they are once they're on, but like even then, kind of not really. They're just like, oh, guys, there's a ship. You want to... Yeah. Let's finish this hand first before we go over there. And I got to get something to eat. Like, there's just such a vibe of like, okay, next ship to rob. It's really infuriating. So, there's this dude that comes through as the captain handling this whole thing. He looks at Miles, immediately is like, you're not a threat. And it's fascinating because Miles is like, I have to think about what I would actually be like in this situation were I what I'm saying I am, which is somebody who is just trying to offload some like cheap crap that isn't really worth anything, but I'm hoping somebody will buy it, and I kind of like everything is riding on this because I don't have a parachute, you know? And I just really loved that he comes up with, like, I am going to be very timid and obey orders immediately and do what is expected of me without arguing because I'm trying to make him happy. Completely makes sense to me. I really liked this. It was, for me, like, it was kind of a call out, honestly, because I am this way when I have to deal with authority figures in a situation where I, like, even with cops, which I really don't like about myself because I think cops are shit, but cops also do genuinely have a lot of power over literal life and death. So I get, with my anxiety, trussed up a lot around them, even when I'm not doing anything wrong. And that's like one of those things that comes with anxiety, is that you start to be like, oh my God, is there something that I haven't done, that I don't know I've done? Is there something, what if there's like a headlight out on the front of my car and I don't even know about it? You know, like, you start to fantasize about all of these things that could be an issue for you, even though right now it's not. Can you just not make problems when there aren't any yet? And I just felt like his assumption on how to, like, handle this was completely correct. So these guys, the way that they're going through this, Bothari submitted to being pawed over with an obvious ill grace that was not lost on the mercenary captain. A sour smile slid over the man's face. The mercenary captain split his crew into 3 inspection parties and gestured Miles and his people ahead of him to nav and comm. His 2 soldiers began spot-checking everything that would come apart, even disassembling the padded swivel chairs. Leaving all in disarray, they went on to the cabins, where the search took on the nature of a ransacking. Miles clenched his teeth and smiled meekly as his personal effects were dumped pell-mell on the floor and kicked through. "These guys have got nothing worth having, Captain Austin. Wait, here's something." Miles froze, appalled at his own carelessness. In collecting and concealing their personal weapons, he had overlooked his grandfather's dagger. And we find out that this thing is basically priceless. It is very old and is just the kind of thing that it's an heirloom. So it has its pricelessness in that respect, but also literally means a ton in Barryaran culture. And this guy has no idea and actually is like, well, it's pretty. Maybe I'll get a decent blade for it, even though it's like a really special kind of alloy. And this whole thing, it's like, you know, basically like a Valyrian steel blade is what I keep thinking of. And this guy is just not seeing it as valuable and putting it in his pocket like he found a quarter on the ground. And Miles, I was starting to be like very anxious for him. Like, okay, you've got to get that back, clearly. But to give Miles credit, he doesn't lose it at this point. He understands, like, either there's a possibility here that he like knew he was going to be making a move and that it was going to probably be easy to pull off because these guys were clearly not on their guard. Or it's possible that he was just accepting that maybe this was going to have to be a loss that he suffered in the midst of this whole thing. But whatever it was that he was assuming, he manages to like keep it together. And let's see. Bothari, as usual, glanced at Miles for confirmation. Austin frowned irritably. "Stop looking at Shorty. You take your orders from me." Bothari straightened and raised an eyebrow. "Sir?" he inquired dulcetly of Miles. Meek, damn it, Sergeant, Miles thought, and sent the message by a slight compression of his lips. "Obey this man, Mr. Bothari," he replied, a little too sharply. Bothari smiled slightly. "Yes, sir." Having established the pecking order in a form more to his taste, he at last unlocked the case with precise, insulting deliberation. I know that this is not working with Miles' plan, but I am sorry, this is very funny. Bothari just being like, I am going to say fuck you in as many ways as I can. Pure body language, like, I love it so much. So eventually they like just basically rob them, like go through their pockets and take their money, and they don't have very much. So this guy's really like, this has not been worth it. And then somebody brings in Elena, and this guy perks up quite a lot. Business before pleasure, though. You carrying any non-Tau Verden currency, honey? I have some. Why? Out with it, then. Miles? Give him your money, Elena. Allison glowered at Miles. You're not my friggin' secretary, Shorty. I don't need you to transmit my orders. I don't want to hear any more backchat from you hear? Miles nodded meekly and rubbed one sweating palm against his trouser seam where a holster wasn't. I did really like that line. So she gives him $500, and Miles is like, where did you get... And she's like, your mom gave it to me. I thought it was a lot, but she wouldn't... And I kept thinking, like, if only he had known that she had that money, maybe that could have helped with a couple of the other things that he has had to sell. But, whatever. All of the money is winding up kind of going to the same place, it seems like, in the end. So eventually, he goes to Mayhew and is like, all right, you ready to go? Mayhew glanced at Miles in uncertainty. Damn it, I asked you, not Shorty. Bad enough that I'll have to look at you over the breakfast table the next few weeks. And then he's like, how about this? You can keep him, and I'll take her. And you guys, it just sounds like what it sounds like. It just does. So I don't blame Miles one bit for leaping to the conclusion that he does. And eventually, he's trying to like make a show of like choose somebody else, and Miles grips the guy's arm, and the dude lights up and is just like, oh, finally. And Miles realizes, oh, he just wanted a fight. That's what he's wanted like this whole time. He's been so bored, and now he's getting to do something. So he punches him down and in the gut. Thankfully, he doesn't like get any bones, so he doesn't break anything. He just drives the breath out of him. But it's pretty brutal considering Miles and his disability and how that must be somewhat visible. He calls Miles a mutant, and then to like beat on him like this is just so like pathetic. And finally, he says, load up. Come on, honey. Elena glanced back over her shoulder to meet Miles' flaming eyes. Her lips parted in a little of understanding, and she stared at Austin with cold calculation. Now, Sergeant, cried Miles, and launched himself at his chosen mercenary. Still shaken from his encounter with the captain, in an inspiration of rare prudence, he picked the one he had seen propping up the wall earlier. The room seemed to explode. And I'm not going to go step by step through this entire fight, but eventually he turns around and he has taken care of one dude, and Bothari has taken care of like almost everybody else, and Elena takes care of a couple others. I'm so sorry, you guys. A mercenary bouncing off Bothari stumbled past Mayhew, who at last found a use for the stunner, blackjacking the man to his knees. Mayhew hit him a couple more times, rather experimentally. Bothari, hurtling past, paused to say disgustedly, "Not like that," grabbed the stunner, and smashed the man flat with one accurately placed blow. Bothari has no time for Mayhew. Oh, God, I can't help it. That is very funny. So, finally, Bothari gets his chance. Elena is like, yeah, go ahead and fuck him up, because he was clearly going to do something not cool with me. And I was kind of gratified by her bloodthirstiness, to be honest. So many stories would have the woman be like, please don't. Enough violence has happened. Enough blood has been spilled. And she's like, no, fuck him up. I would like to see the color of his blood now. And I was like, yeah, all right. See, thank you. I appreciate you, girl. So they have to decide what they're going to do. And it says Miles suddenly realized he had not seen Baz Jessic in the fight. There he was, pinned against the far wall. So Miles comes over and at first thinks he's hurt. And then he realizes this guy is just flipping out. And he has to calm him down. I really felt like I appreciated getting to see the way that Jessic is reacting to this violence, because you can't just have this guy do something that was going to get him executed before the book starts. And then later on, he's just able to deal with this kind of thing and it doesn't faze him. So he's basically like in the fetal position. And Miles is saying, we've got no choice. We have to capture their ship now. The best shot is to take their shuttle and make them think it's their own people coming back. That can only be done in the next few minutes. The only chance of escape for any of us is to take them before they get a squeak out. I'm going to assign the sergeant and Dom to take their nav and comm room and prevent that. The next most vital section is engineering with all the overrides. You're clearly the man for that one, so I'm assigning it to you and Elena. The engineer turned his face back, if possible more drained than before. Oh no. Mayhew and I will float, stunning anything that moves. 30 minutes from now, it will all be over one way or another. I can't. Look, you're not the only one who's terrified. I'm scared witless. You don't look scared. You don't even look scared when that mercenary decked you. You looked pissed. That's because I got forward momentum. There's no virtue in it. It's just a balancing act. I don't dare stop. I can't. I've tried. I'm drafting you. What? I claim you. I'm confiscating you. I'm seizing your property, your training for the war effort. This is totally illegal, but since you're under a death sentence anyway, who cares? Get down on your knees and put your hands between mine. And Jessic's like, wait, you have to be a vor to do this. And he's like, yeah, weird, huh? Well, I guess we'll just have to go with it anyway. I am a vassal secundus to Gregor Vobara, and I can take you for a liegeman, and I'm going to right now because I'm in a hell of a hurry. You're a lunatic. What the bloody hell do you think this is going to do? Distract you, thought Miles, and it's working already. Maybe, but I'm a vor lunatic. Down. And he just does it because I guess that Baryaran, like, obedience to vors is deep. And so he does this whole pledge. And I love the fact that it's like very jankily put together. And Miles is thinking, you know what? Even though that seemed like it was irregular, that's probably more accurate to how it usually goes in, like, historically. And I was like, probably just shit done in the heat of the moment to try and get somebody to do what you're telling them. Like, yeah. So they get the pilot officer. Baz, take Elena and the Major and start hauling these guys to hold 4, the one with nothing in it. They might wake up and get creative, so weld the door shut on them. Then unseal our own weapons cache, get the stunners and plasma arcs, and check out the mercenary shuttle. We'll meet you there in a few minutes. When Elena dragged out the last unconscious body by the ankles, it was the mercenary captain, and she was noticeably not careful what his head bumped on the way. Miles shut the door and turned to his prisoner. You know, I sure would appreciate it if we could skip all the preliminaries and go straight to your codes. It would save a lot of grief. Sure it would for you. No truth drugs, huh? Too bad. You're out of luck. Bothari tensed, eyes strangely alight. Not yet, Sergeant. You're right. We have no drugs, I'm sorry, but we still must have your cooperation. Stick it, Shorty. We don't mean to kill your friends. We just want to stun them. Time's on my side. Whatever you can dish out, I can take. If you kill me, I can't talk. Miles motioned Bothari aside. This is your department, Sergeant. Seems to me he's right. It would be better with the codes. Safer. I don't see how we can get them. I can get them. You can always break a pilot if you'll give me a free hand. The expression on Bothari's face disturbed Miles. The confidence was all right. It was the underlying air of anticipation that put knots in his guts. You must decide now, my lord. Go ahead, Sergeant. You may wish to wait in the corridor. No, I ordered it. I'll see it through. As you will. I need the knife. They don't make them like that anymore, because it's the good knife. Sir, I beg you to cooperate. I just don't buy you, Shorty. I'm not afraid of a little pain. He's yours, Sergeant. Hold him still. The mercenary took in Bothari's face, and his grin slipped. One edge of Bothari's mouth turned upward in a smile Miles had never seen before, and immediately hoped he would never see again. The mercenary swallowed. Bothari placed the tip of the dagger against the side of the silver button on the man's right temple, and wriggled it a little, to slip it beneath the edge. The mercenary's eyes shifted right, gone white-rimmed. You wouldn't dare, he whispered. A drop of blood ringed the circle in a quick blink. The mercenary inhaled sharply and began. Wait! Bothari twisted the knife sideways, grasped the button between thumb and finger of his free hand, and yanked. An ululating scream broke from the mercenary's throat. He lunged convulsively from Miles and Mayhew's grasp and fell to his knees, mouth open, eyes gone huge in shock. Bothari dangled the implant before the man's eyes. Oh, God. Mayhew sees this and throws up. Because he, knows what this is, to have this implant, and what it would do. And Miles is sort of like, I probably shouldn't have kept him in the room. I mean, he's probably right, but there's no way that he could have known how Bothari was going to handle this. And he comes to the guy's face again, Bothari does, and placed the dagger's point against the button on his forehead. Pain is not the point. Begin. The man found his tongue abruptly, pouring out betrayal in his terror. There was, thought Miles, no question of clever subterfuge in the information tripping frantically out of his mouth. Miles overcame his own trembling belly to listen intently, carefully, thoroughly, that nothing be lost or missed or wasted. When he began to repeat himself, Bothari pulled him cringing to his feet and frog-marched him to the shuttle hatch corridor. Eventually, because this was implanted the way it was, this guy suffers a stroke. And Bothari is utterly unrepentant. Now, I kind of feel like maybe Bothari could have made the threat and still gotten this information without actually going through with it. I kind of think. It's not about that. It's that he didn't consider doing it that way because it's not what he wanted to do. There is a streak of cruelty in him, and that is just a fact. You know, the man is unbalanced, and he's on the daily just about keeping it together, but there is something right under the surface. And that is again, I know I'm saying this a lot, but he just reminds me so much of my father in that respect. And my father, he was not abusive, but he was somebody that I felt at any moment could lose his temper and lose control of himself, and control was something he valued a lot. So he kept a lid on it almost my whole life. And there were only like 2 instances where I really saw it slip. But one of those times, I ran from him and locked myself in a bathroom with a solid wood door, and he broke the door in half. So that instinct that I had about the danger that he could be was very correct, even though there was not a lot of evidence to support it. It was just a gut instinct I always had as a kid. And, you know, like the kind of rage and how out of control he had to be to literally throw his body against a solid wood door and break it in half. That's somebody who is really not holding it together very well. And I just feel that with Bothari, that he's on the edge all the time. And he's in, like, saying, like, I like being bored. I think that he means it. It's how he's getting through. And now he's being put in this place where he's able to lean into some of the darker parts of who he is. And it's useful. But Miles, please be careful, because I don't know how much you can do take-backsies on this. And you sure can't do take-backsies on seeing the side of him. You know it's there now, and I'm not sure you even still get the full extent of it. And I don't know what kind of damage this does to Elena to find out her father can do this. She doesn't see this, and I kind of anticipate Miles isn't going to tell her about it, but I don't know what Bothari might do without realizing she's there, and that will change their relationship forever. Never mind, perhaps eventually finding out who her mother is. So, yeah. Mayhew eventually is just like, this is fucked up. He's insane. And Miles is like, I gave him the order. And Mayhew's like, yeah, you gave him the order to do what needed to be done. That was somebody who was having a good time. That's not the same thing as I'm carrying out an order. He was delighted. You could clearly tell. And he says, I've known he's my responsibility. I don't excuse myself. And Mayhew's like, okay, so he is psychotic. And Miles just kind of wraps it with, like, if you have an issue about him, come to me. So I'm so over time here, I think. Maybe I'm not, though, actually, because I started late. They came up without challenge or incident on the aerial shuttle hatch, and Miles floated aft to assist Jessic with locking on. Miles decided not to waste time arguing with him about precedence. You first, but I'm next. My reaction time will be quicker if my attention is not divided, my lord. Oh, very well. You then... No. Then Baz. Then Dom, me, Elena, and Mayhew. So they go in. They hear some people exclaiming, but it seems like nobody is really anticipating anything. So they are able to go through pretty easily initially. And let's see. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the spot. They do it that way on the vids, Mayhew offered. He runs into a room and just starts shouting. And Miles has to be like, hey, it's probably better if you don't shout. And I love when he's like, well, you know, in movies, because Miles thinks to himself, like, yeah, I probably would have done it that way because I have seen those movies too. Like, you know, I like that even though Miles knows better, it's not like he knows better immediately. He knows better upon reflection. So the mercenary officer reacted instantly, turning the accidental collision into a tackle. Mayhew received a kick to the abdomen. Miles was slammed into the wall and found himself in a clutching, scrambling fight for possession of his own arsenal. And I think this person, this is so weird, guys, because I think they're a hermaphrodite and they call them it, which in my gut feels super offensive because it seems so dehumanizing. But I have found out that there are a lot of people who are non-binary who actually prefer it to them. And, you know, this is why you've got to ask, but I just like, my knee-jerk reaction to calling somebody it is just like, oh my God, ew, just that is so gross to do. And I had to kind of be like, well, maybe that's my baggage. If people want that, then who the fuck am I? But anyway, he starts looking for Elena at one point because there's a first aid kit missing from the spot where it should be. And he finds Jessic, and Elena is like applying some ointment to his arm because he got burned. The smile ignited to a grin when he saw Miles. He stood and gave Miles a snappy Barryaran regulation service salute. "Engineering is secured, my lord," he intoned, then gulped a giggle. Stifling hysteria, Miles realized. So he asks, like, what happened. And Elena is explaining. And in the end, Miles is like, he lets the fact that this guy made himself look good in front of Elena, I think, is also a factor. But just the fact that this guy got so much done, he lets that get the better of him. And he says, like, I don't think I would have dared. Like, she had said at the end of her explanation what happened, of like, I don't think I would have dared, would you? And he says, no, I'd probably taken my own plasma arc and tried to burn through the brackets on that overhead light bar and drop it on him, then either nail him after he was smashed or else stun him as he jumped out from under. Oh, said Elena. Jessic's grin faded slightly. I didn't think of that. Miles kicked himself mentally. Ass. What kind of commander tries to score points off a man who needs built up? A damned short-sighted one, obviously. I might not have either under fire. It's deceptively easy to second-guess somebody when you're not in the heat yourself. You did extremely well, Mr. Jessic. Thank you, my lord. I was so glad that Miles caught himself right away. I had a moment of just like, oh, come now, you did not. And I was just very relieved that maybe he was being short-sighted in the moment, but it was very brief, and he caught himself so fast that he almost undid it. It's not quite enough, but it's, I think it was still good. And there's a bunch of women also, so he like sort of realizes that perhaps these women who are seen as equals and are part of the crew are like, maybe she wasn't going to be in the kind of danger he thought she was, but And the shuttle hatch was lonely and quiet, but for the soft susurrations of air circulation. And they're talking about what they're going to do with these people. First, there's the death of this guy. And at one point, when they're talking about what to do with the others, Mayhew was like, well, what are you going to do? Put him out the airlock? And when they sort of look at him and he realizes that had been a thought, he seems really taken aback at the fact that they are considering this. But Bothari, like I said, there's no like repentance for what he did, and Miles asks for the implant. Bothari takes it back, or Bothari gives it back, and Miles puts it where it had been, and just kind of like tries to give this man his identity back, washes him off, and just really treats him with a lot of respect. And it can be that it was motivated by just the sheer, like, his regret at the situation and almost trying to undo his death. But I don't know. I think it's more fundamental than that. Bothari says one casualty is not bad for an operation of this nature. His life saved many, and not just on our side. Ah, said Miles, dry and cold. I'll keep that in mind when I come to explain to my father how it was we happened to torture a prisoner to death. Bothari flinched. After a silence, he reiterated his interest in the ongoing weapons search, and Miles released him with a tired nod. He flinches. He does not apologize, and of course he wouldn't. I can't tell if the flinch hit home because it's like, I realize maybe I shouldn't have done that or shouldn't be so dismissive of it, or if it's just Miles having seen him the way he has for the first time, I think maybe Bothari is realizing the way Miles sees him has shifted in a way that can't be undone. Until Dom came looking for him with some requests for orders, he stood and meditated on the still waxen features of the thing they'd made. But reason seemed to run backwards, conclusions swallowed in premises, and premises in silence, until in the end only silence and the unanswerable object remained. A hell of a sentence that has been highlighted by a lot of people. It feels almost too convoluted to me. I was surprised by how many people highlighted it. And I'm not saying this is for sure the reason, but like sometimes the fact that something sounds convoluted can seem more impressive to people, I've realized. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just a dodo bird. That's also certainly possible. All right, guys. I am quite over time, so I have to wrap this one up. My God, I did an hour and 20 minutes. Y'all, I am a disaster today. Anyway, I was going to say I apologize for starting late, but I feel that going 20 minutes over really kind of makes up for that. So I take it back. I'm not apologizing. You're welcome. All right, guys. Thank you again so much. Thank you, Jen, for commissioning this. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.